Hi guys, you are welcome in this video. Dear students, today we are going to talk about two new terms, fable and parable, as we have started a series on literary terms. Previous we talked about allegory. What is allegory? Its examples and the very definitions of allegory. In this video, we are going to talk about fable and parable. If you look at all these terms, you find allegory, fable, parable, then you have exemplum and proverb seem similar, and yes, there are similarity among all these terms. If you go through their examples, you find that some examples are of allegory and the same example is of parable. So how this happens, or what is the minor difference between all these terms, we are going to talk in this video. So be careful about studying these terms so that you can understand better what is parable, what is fable, what is allegory. So this is hash third video on literary terms, fable and parable. So let's start with the definition of fable. What is fable? Dear students, fable also is called apologue, and here is the definition. I quote from M.H. Abrams and Geoffrey Harpham's A Handbook of Literary Terms. So here we have a fable is a short narrative in prose or verse that exemplifies an abstract moral thesis or principle of human behavior. Usually, at its conclusion, either the narrator or one of the characters states the moral in the form of an epigram. Now, dear students, let's understand what is important in this definition. If you read this definition, you find that fable can happen in prose or verse. So, it appears in prose as well as in verse. So, we need not to distinguish that fables are there in the verse or poetry. Fables appear in verse or poetry and at the same time in prose. So, we have examples in poetry and prose or novels or fiction too. So what are important words in this definition, so that we can dissect this definition into pieces and understand better what is fable. So here I colored the words which are important in this definition. Let's look at it. So here we have short narrative. You can see golden color or yellowish color. Short narrative, abstract moral thesis or principle, and epigram. So I think these are important words in the definition. So fable is a short narrative. Now again, what is narrative? Narrative is nothing but story or tale. Again, what is important? It is in the form of epigram. So you have moral thesis or moral lesson in the fable, and it is in the form of epigram, often or mostly. So what is epigram? Again, the new term arises here. Epigram is nothing but a pointed statement which reflects the thought, single thought of the person who is uttering that statement, or the author who is writing that statement. And this statement may appear in prose, or again you have lines in poem. So prose or verse, wherever you can have this statement. Now dear students, so epigram is nothing but a pointed statement which reveals something paradoxical. It is a sturge statement made on some situation, on some persons. So there are variation. So these words are important in fable. Now what is fable? It's very simple. Fable is nothing but a short narrative, again a short tale or short story, which includes moral lesson. It is important. So you need to understand about this moral lesson. Every fable have moral lesson, and it may be in the form of epigram or simple statement. So this is important in M.H. Abrams and Geoffrey Harpham's definition. Let's move to the next definition by Chris Baldick. So here we have a short Oxford history of literary terms, and in that book Chris Baldick talks about fable. Here is the definition. I quote: a brief tale in verse or prose that conveys a moral lesson, usually by giving human speech and manners to animals and inanimate things. Fables often conclude with a moral delivered in the form of an epigram. Again, there is similarity between these two definitions. Definition by Abrams and Chris Baldick. Again, it is nothing but a short narrative. Again, it is a short tale short story, but it includes moral lesson in that particular short tale or short story, and it is again in the form of epigram according to Chris Bardick. Now here one major thing we can have in this definition, that the human speech is attributed to inanimate things. For example, those who do not speak. For example, we have animals. So animals can speak like human beings and it becomes a fable. We have many examples of fables. Before looking at those examples, let's understand what are the important words in this definition so that we can understand better. Here you have a brief tale, moral lesson, giving human speech and manners to animals and inanimate things, and again epigram. So it is concluded in the epigram. So these words are important in this definition. It is a tale, again a moral tale, and human speech is attributed to animals often or inanimate things, and then it becomes fables. Now it's time to understand the examples. There are many examples. For example, we have beast fables of Aesop or Aesop fables. You might have heard before this. So there are many fables. For example, one fable is of the fox and sour grapes. You might have heard about this fable. Actually, this is a fable. Again, it gives you moral lesson. So what is that tale or story of fox and fable? It's very simple. The fox goes to have the grapes, but it is out of its reach, and then making many attempts to get that grapes, he just couldn't get that grapes, and then he says that the grapes might be sour. The same kind of things we do in the human behavior, you find in the human behavior. So sometimes you find that some things are out of your reach, and you say that this might be bad things which are out of my reach. So there are the things like fox in our life, and hence we have this beast fable, fox. There are many famous beast fables. Let's move to the next example. Again, we have Indian collection Bitpai or Panchatantra, uh, which were written in 300 Christian era. Then we have Chaucer's The Nun's Priest's Tale. It is a story of cock and fox, again a beast fable. Then we have the recent stories like Rudyard Kipling's Just So Stories, published in 1902. Then we have James Thurber's Fables of Our Times, 1940. It is a recent set of short fables. And then we have very famous George Orwell's Animal Farm, published in 1945. So if you look at Animal Farm, you find that it is an allegory, it is a political satire, it is again a fable. Why fable? Because you find animals talk like human beings, animals behave like human beings, animals have their own state like human beings. So there is similarity in human behavior and animals behavior. And at the end, or in the novel, in the fiction, in this short satire, you find moral is inherent on every story. If you look at or if you read, you find there is some morality of which should be followed by human beings in the form of fable, in the form of animals behavior. So this is Animal Farm. Now students, let's move to the next part of our literary terms, that is parable. What is parable? So here we have the definition of parable. A parable is a very short narrative about human beings presented so as to stress the tacit analogy or parallel with a general thesis or lesson that the narrator is trying to bring home to his audience. Now what are the important words? Again we have important word, very short narrative, analogy or parallel, thesis or lesson. Now if you look at this parable, there is similarity in fable and parable. What is difference? The difference is that it is an analogy or parallel. Now what happens in parable? In parable, the analogy, tacit analogy is followed. So one event follows the other, one statement follows the other, one kind of behavior follows the other. So this kind of analogy, this kind of chain is built in parable. So there are famous parables of Jesus of Nazareth. There are 40 parables in Christian literature which are often used in the English literature. often used by many authors, many writers in their works. So these 40 parables of Jesus of Nazareth. So we have this example. Again, what is important in parable? It includes a thesis or lesson. So you have a lesson in the parable. So parables also are very famous in English literature, and it can be found in verse or prose. Again, we have Mark Turner's quotation from the Literary Mind, his book, and he says, I quote, any projection of one story onto another, a basic cognitive principle, every level of our experience shows up everywhere from simple actions like telling time to complex literary creations like Prost's Ella research du temps perdu. Now it is a broader view of parable. What is in parable? So parable can be a minor kind of thing or a major kind of thing. It can be right from the time which shows up to audience to the broader things in the life happen. So this kind of things. So here basically Turner says that it's not a device, it is a principle in literature. So parables are often used in English literature, and so we have this example or this statement by Mark Turner. So students, here we have examples of parables. So as I already told you that there are 40 parables attributed to Jesus of Nazareth in Christian literature, and often they are appeared in the English literature. Then we have Wilfred Owen's poem The Parable of the Old Man and the Young 1920, and John Steinbeck's The Pearl 1940. So these are some of the examples of parables. So parable may appear in poem or in prose, in novel. So parable basically is nothing but an analogy. What happens first, what happens second, what happens third. So this is the chain of analogy. This is a chain of actions, and it can be ranged right from trivial actions in the poem or in the fiction or in the novel to the complex literary creations like Prost's the work we have mentioned here. So this is about fable and parable. Now dear students, please find out the difference between fable and parable, and please comment the difference in the comment section. I will appreciate your comments. So thank you very much for watching the complete video. Please subscribe our channel Literature Simply and share these videos among your friends so that they can be benefited with all these videos. Let's meet in the next video.